Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Israel to grant Jerusalem national priority status. Iraq calls for investigation into WikiLeaks torture allegations. And Shias make gain in Bahrain polls. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now. Israeli politicians expressed their concerns that the bill of granting Jerusalem the national priority status of Area A may cause tension in Israel's relations with Washington and European countries.
The ministerial committee approved the bill that will grant the residents of Jerusalem privileges in housing, employment, and education.
Experts interpreted the bill's prioritizing construction in East Jerusalem as an attempt to intensify settlement activities in the city.
Our correspondent Walid Al-Omar gives us further information on the bill.
The Israeli Occupation Authority continued to give notifications to the Palestinian Jerusalemites in the Silwan neighborhood, threatening to demolish their houses and raise taxes that will ravage their incomes. Social services also ignored this neighborhood. Meanwhile, the Israeli Ministerial Committee on Legislative Affairs approved a bill that will grant Jerusalem the Israeli national priority status. This means that Jerusalem will have the priority in construction, tax benefits, and various services. On the surface, this seems like a positive bill, but its hidden agenda is to promote settlement activities. This was confirmed by the supporters of the bill in the Israeli government and Knesset. A Knesset member said without hesitation that the goal of this bill was to make it clear to the Palestinians and the world that their demands regarding Jerusalem were wrong and would not be achieved, and that the Israeli government was not ready to discuss it in negotiations.
The bill creates a provocation and shows the state of disarray in the Israeli government, which doesn't know how to get out of its dilemma. On one hand, Netanyahu cannot abandon the right wing, as he is a right-wing leader himself. On the other hand, he cannot jeopardize Israel's relationship with the United States.
مشروع القانون الذي سيبدأ الكنيست ببحث المصادقة عليه قريبا بادر إليه أحد
The Knesset will discuss the approval of the bill soon. The bill was initiated by one of the most prominent settlement promoters and has gained support from 45 representatives in the ruling cabinet.
القانون يخول السلطة المحلية تحديد المجموعات السكانية التي تستفيد.
The bill empowers the local authority, especially the residential communities that benefit from it. It does not exclude occupied areas of Jerusalem and the settlement neighborhoods, considering them part of what it calls Israel with its eternal capital, the Great Jerusalem. Palestinians see it as Israel's new trick to sabotage the already dying peace process.
أي مساس بمدينة القدس سواء كان استيطانا.
Any issue concerning the city of Jerusalem, be it the settlement or judification or any illegal act, will not lead to any agreement. Israel's current policy not only creates obstacles for the peace process, but also creates a destructive environment for everything, not only in the Palestinian area, but in the entire region.
ليس الفلسطينيون الوحيدون في هذا الموقف فداخل إسرائيل وحكومة.
Palestinians are not alone in this position. Some people in Israel and the Israeli government see the new law as the opening of a new confrontation with the Europeans and the US administration. They believe that this bill is announced as the Jewish state has no more cards to play.
ورقة الدولة اليهودية. حتى لمن في عينه رمد لم تبق الحكومة الإسرائيلية مجالا للشكوك والأوهام.
Even to the most deluded people, the Israeli government has not left much room for doubts or illusions about the truth of its relentless acts in the Palestinian territories, expanding the settlements in the West Bank, excluding Jerusalem from the agenda of negotiations, and issuing racist laws to undermine human rights. Walid Al-Umari, Al Jazeera, Occupy Jerusalem.
Al Jazeera, القدس المحتلة.
The Synod of Bishops for the Middle East called on Israel to end its occupation of Palestinian territories, but Israel has rejected his call. Also, Pope Benedict XVI requested freedom of worship for Christians in the Middle East in order to end their exodus from the region.
The Pope's message was clear, allowing the freedom to perform religious rituals for non-Muslims in Middle Eastern countries.
تسمح دول كثيرة في الشرق الأوسط بحرية العمل.
While many states in the Middle East allow freedom of belief, the space given to the freedom to practice religion is often quite limited. This freedom should be reinforced in order to guarantee that every person who belongs to a different religious community has the real freedom to express his personal beliefs.
إذن هو ناقوس خطر يدقه البابا بسبب ما يقول إنها تضييق.
The Pope cautioned that Christians were immigrating out of their region and their numbers were dwindling due to the harassment that they faced. According to political observers, these harassments include prosecution, murder, discrimination, and sectarian tension.
وبحسب إحصائيات فإن المسيحيين
Statistics show that nearly 20% of residents in the Middle Eastern countries were Christians a century ago. But now only 5% of them were Christians, and this number is still decreasing.
وما زالت هذه النسبة في انخفاض. وتتبين الظروف التي يعيش فيها
Christians in various countries live under different circumstances. In Iraq, for example, large groups of Christians were forced to leave the country in fear of what they call killings and acts of violence.
تعرضهم إلى تصفيات جسدية وأعمال عنف. أما في مصر حيث يعيش
A majority of Middle Eastern Christians live in Egypt, where religious harmony is emphasized. However, tension caused by conflicts between families from the two religions could turn into criminal cases or violent acts.
أعمال عنف تحركها نزاعات بين عائلات من الديانتين.
Some Christians also complain that they have difficulties in building churches.
صعوبات في بناء الكنائس. ولا توجد أرقام محددة لعدد المسيحيين في الشرق الأوسط، لكن يعتقد
The number of Christians in the Middle East is not determined, but it is believed that there are more than 10 million of them. Observers say that Christians are increasingly complaining about harassments due to the growth of what they call the extreme Islamist movement in recent years.
وفي منطقة دول الخليج فإن أغلب المسيحيين هم من العمالة الوافدة.
In the Gulf countries, there are about 3.5 million Christians, most of whom are immigrant employees. Their situations vary as well. In Saudi Arabia, it is forbidden to build houses of worship for non-Muslims.
في حين تسمح دول خليجية أخرى ببناء كنائس للمقيمين.
Other Gulf countries allow the building of churches for the Christians there. Kufa Zian, BBC.
واصلت منظمة التعاون والتنمية الاقتصادية أعمال الدورة السادسة.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development continued its 86th International Tourism Conference in Jerusalem. The Palestinian Authority and member countries of the organization denounced the convening of the conference in the occupied city. Palestinian sources equated the act to the organization's approval of Israel's control and sovereignty over the city.
هذه هي الدورة 86 للجنة السياحة التابعة لمنظمة التعاون والتنمية.
This is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's 86th Tourism Conference. It is traditionally held in Paris, but this session was hosted by the Israeli Ministry of Tourism in Jerusalem. 28 member countries are attending the conference, while 4 member countries, including Turkey, are absent. Turkey had announced its boycott of the conference, and Britain was said to have objections to having the conference convene in Jerusalem. Representatives of the international organization said that they are not aware of the reasons behind the absence of the 4 countries, affirming that the conference is not political but professional, aimed at developing tourism in Israel and other member countries.
The event was coordinated on professional, not political grounds and has no political connotations. The organization usually convenes its regular meetings in Paris. Another member country proposed to host this session.
Meetings in Paris.
وكانت مسألة اختيار القدس لاستضافة أعمال اللجنة قد أثارت.
Choosing Jerusalem as the host city for the conference generated a wave of reactions and drew attention to Israel. The Israeli Minister of Tourism was quoted saying that convening the meeting in Jerusalem is a confirmation of Israel's sovereignty over the entire city. However, in a press conference, the minister denied making such statements. He said that parties opposing the event, in a reference to the Palestinians, are wrong, and that Israel and the Palestinian territories' geopolitical reality affects both of their tourism industries in the same manner.
I'm very sorry that there are some elements that do not care about the economic progress and the region's current positive tourism sector. They are trying to negatively affect the current situation.
الفلسطينيون من جهتهم يؤكدون أن
For their part, the Palestinians reiterated that OECD member countries' approval of Jerusalem as the host city of the current conference implies these countries' recognition of Israel's sovereignty over Jerusalem. Israel wants the city to be its capital.
ما في حدا من هاي الدول أو حتى من كل قرارات الأمم المتحدة ما في حدا أقر بما فيها الولايات المتحدة أقر.
None of these countries, including the United States, and no United Nations resolutions recognize Jerusalem as part of Israel. But on the other hand, we see them treating Jerusalem as part of Israel.
مضمومة ومكرس ضمها وهي جزء من إسرائيل.
وكانت إسرائيل قد انضمت إلى المنظمة.
Israel joined the OECD this year, exerting economic development efforts to comply with international standards.
مع معايير المنظمة.
هذا المؤتمر هو من بين المؤتمرات القليلة التي تعقدها منظمة التعاون والتنمية.
This conference is one of the few OECD conferences that has caused wide-scale controversy. Perhaps it has a political agenda, but it may carry a clear message of Israel's stance on Jerusalem. From Jerusalem, Shireen Yunus, BBC.
Tension between Jerusalem and the Vatican increased, with government officials angrily rejecting Catholic pronouncements over Israeli policy. The Vatican Synod sparked the dispute Saturday by blaming Israel for the dwindling Christian presence in the Holy Land, while demanding that the Jewish state end its occupation of Arab lands. We get more on the growing controversy in this report from IBA's Aaron Viner.
Libelous. That's how Deputy Foreign Minister Dani Ayalon characterized the final communique issued by the Synod of Catholic Bishops at the close of the group's two-week special assembly on the Middle East. 200 bishops, 36 experts, and 34 auditors from the region convened at the Vatican at the invitation of Pope Benedict XVI, who yesterday made his own urgent call for peace in the Middle East during a mass marking the conclusion of the special summit. Jerusalem strongly railed against the pronouncements of the church elders that Israel is responsible for a Christian exodus from the region by disturbing Palestinian socio-economic lives with checkpoints, the West Bank separation wall, and house demolition, while holding political prisoners and continuing to occupy Palestinian lands, including Jerusalem. Archbishop Cyril Salim Boustros read the Synod declaration demanding that Jerusalem stop using the biblical concept of a promised land or chosen people as the basis for Jewish immigration, Palestinian expatriation, and as justification for new settlements in Jerusalem and other territories.
It has never been any Israeli government's policy to use the scriptures as a justification for anything. When we hear such statements, all we can say is that let he who has not sinned throw the first stone.
The American Jewish Committee's Rabbi David Rosen called the Synod's final statement appalling, saying that the bishops lacked the courage to address challenges of intolerance and extremism of Muslim nations in which they reside, but chose instead to focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
I think that the important thing for the Vatican and for the Catholic Church to be able to do is to clarify that politics are one thing and that theology is the other thing, and that while you can take a position on an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the commitment of the Church to a respectful relationship with the Jewish people, as the Jewish people understands itself, is not to be influenced by these political considerations. And that was basically the essence of my call when I spoke at the Synod of Bishops in the Vatican in the presence of the Pope.
There was also open dismissal of the Church position among the Israeli public.
It's our land. It was the land that we have gotten. It was given to us by God in the Torah. And this is the land that's ours now, and we shouldn't have to give it back.
The bishops, who all hail from the Middle East, also declared that they would like to see a two-state solution for peace between Israel and the Palestinians, while urging the United Nations to end Israeli occupation of Arab lands. And perhaps most sensitive of all, in apparent disregard of Israel's declaration of Jerusalem as its united and eternal capital, the Synod's concluding message repeated a Vatican call for Jerusalem to hold a special status, which respects its particular character as a city sacred to the three great monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, while advocating that Christians in the region refuse to sell their homes and properties. This is Aaron Viner for IBA News.
الإخفاق الانتخابي الثالث في عهد البرلمان في البحرين حمل معه
Bahrain's third parliamentary elections have witnessed a large voter turnout, with more than 67% of eligible voters casting ballots. The initial results have shown that the Wifaq National Islamic Opposition Society has won 18 out of 40 seats at the Council of Representatives.
مقعدا من أصل 40 في مجلس النواب وبينما حسم مصير 5 مقاعد.
In addition, 5 parliamentary candidates have already won by acclamation. A second round of voting will be held next Saturday for 9 seats that were not won by 50% of votes.
لها على نسبة 50% من الأصوات. أما النساء اللواتي خضن المنافسة ب8
None of the 8 women candidates has won in the first round of voting. However, women have not completely lost hope, as one of their candidates will compete in the second round of voting.
لانتقالها إلى جولة التصويت الثانية.
Joining us from Manama is our Dubai correspondent, Ahmad Nazi. Ahmad, are the results final?
نعم سحر لقد ظهرت كل النتائج حاليا يعني شبه رسمية.
Yes, Sahar, the results are final. They are official. The Bahraini authorities have announced the final results. There has been a surprising twist.
بعض المفاجآت ربما صبت في صالح المستقلين هذه المرة.
Independents have gained ground at the expense of the Islamic Sunni movement, which has reportedly lost 2 of its parliamentary seats. The Muslim Brotherhood also lost 1 or 2 seats at the Council of Representatives.
يعني حتى الإخوان أو جمعية الإخوان المسلمين خسرت مقعد أو مقعدين في البرلمان.
In contrast, all candidates of Al-Wifaq National Islamic Opposition Society have won, securing 18 parliamentary seats.
مرشحيها في 18 أو 18 مقعدا حتى الآن المرأة حقيقة لم.
None of the female candidates has won due to measures or mistakes cited in a number of voting districts.
الأخطاء التي وقعت فيها بعض المراكز لكنها ستدخل في مرحلة جديدة وانتخابات جديدة مكملة.
However, women still have another chance to secure a council seat. One of the women candidates has won a bid to compete in the second round of voting after winning by acclamation at the Council of Representatives.
بعد أن فازت إحدى النساء في مقعد في المجلس النيابي بالتزكية.
What are some of the election ramifications this year? What do Bahrainis expect from their Council of Representatives?
هذه الانتخابات جميلة جدا فهي أسهمت يعني بإعطاء البحرين.
This year's elections were significant. They were able to portray a new civilized image of Bahrain and its democratic process. The media played a notable role of covering these remarkable events. Bahrainis hope that the new Council of Representatives will help move the country's democratic process forward.
البحرينيون يتمنون من هذا المجلس أن يكون امتداد لمسيرة الديمقراطية.
Bahrainis expect the new council to cling to democratic reforms and help resolve all outstanding issues that have been ignored by previous councils.
من هنا الملفات العالقة في أدراج المجالس السابقة كالبطالة وحقوق.
They firmly expect their new council to tackle all issues, including unemployment, women's rights, housing, and others.
المجلس القادم النيابي كان أو ما هو موجود حتى على.
They also hope that the new parliament and municipal council will continue to play an integral part in the country's development and help meet the needs of its citizens.
Ahmad Nazi, Dubai correspondent in Manama, thank you very much.
توقيت مريب يهدف لعرقلة جهود تشكيل حكومة عراقية جديدة.
Their timing is questionable and aims to hamper Iraq's efforts to form its new government. This is how outgoing Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki described the timing of the Wikileaks disclosure regarding the war on Iraq. However, other Iraqi officials called for an investigation into the allegations of abuse cited against Iraqi members of the police and armed forces and vowed to punish the perpetrators. The Iraqi Ministry of Human Rights said that it was not surprised by the Wikileaks report, especially regarding the number of civilian fatalities. Amidst calls for investigation, Iraqis hope that the new disclosure will not further fuel the country's volatile political situation. Shafiq Abdul Jabbar reports from Baghdad.
المتعثر أصلا. شفيق عبد الجبار من بغداد.
The latest disclosure of the Wikileaks documents is dominating the political spectrum in Iraq, despite what many believe that it did not bring anything new. The new documents cited allegations against the U.S. Army, Iran, Syria, as well as outgoing Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. More than 400 leaked documents are reportedly sufficient enough to show evidence of abuse in the Iraq war. The U.S. forces have deliberately covered up military mistakes, claiming the lives of thousands of civilians, in addition to turning a blind eye to acts of abuse and torture in Iraqi jails. The documents also accuse some of Iraq's neighbors of supporting and arming Iraqi militias and death squads. The Iraqi Ministry of Human Rights was not surprised by the WikiLeaks report.
Some of the information released in the documents did not come as a surprise to us at the Ministry of Human Rights. For example, the number of fatalities was estimated at 109,000, which is close to the 100,000 figure cited by the Ministry of Human Rights. Also, the deliberate killing by the multinational forces was documented in the ministry's reports.
The leaked documents accused Maliki of operating death and torture squads. Maliki slammed the new documents, saying that they aim to hamper his efforts to secure a second term in office.
The timing is questionable as it comes amidst efforts to form the new government. It will have ramifications at the various political fronts. Some political rivals will likely seize on it. Once we know more about the group responsible for releasing such documents, we will see more public reactions.
The Iraqi public has expressed reaction, with more reaction to come as WikiLeaks website vowed to release more documents. WikiLeaks website has already published the documents. However, what's important to Iraqis is that the new disclosure will not hamper their country's slow and bumpy political process.
NATO said its forces killed at least 15 insurgents in a raid and airstrike targeting a Taliban commander in southern Afghanistan last night. It said Afghan and NATO-led forces killed 4 insurgents in clashes during the initial raid in Helmand province. Later, they called in airstrikes, killing 11 more insurgents as they approached in vehicles. Separately, Afghan President Hamid Karzai admitted his presidential office received bags of cash from Iran and other friendly countries as aid to help with expenses in the palace. He was reacting to a report by the New York Times that a bag of money was received by Karzai's chief of staff as part of a secret steady stream of Iranian cash. Karzai told a news conference with Tajikistan's president that the money is transparent and Afghanistan is entitled to ask for cash from its neighbor.
They have asked for good relations in return and for lots of other things in return. And Afghanistan and Iran have neighborhood relations, and we've also asked a lot of things for return in this relationship. So it's a relationship between neighbors, and it will go on, and we'll continue to ask for cash help from Iran.
Somali security forces said that 27 al-Shabaab rebels and several Somali soldiers were killed in the clashes that erupted in the town Balad Hawa along the Somali-Kenyan border. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council asked the African Union, the AU, to provide more details on its troop surge plan, which the UN is being asked to fund. The AU wants to increase the number of its peacekeeping forces deployed in Somalia.
It will be a conditional UN support. This is how the UN Security Council responded to a request by the AU to boost the number of its peacekeeping forces in Somalia from the current 7,000 to 20,000. The AU also wants to increase its police force to 1,680. The Security Council asked the AU to provide more details of its surge plan before pledging funds.
The situation in Somalia requires more troop buildup. The international community must step up its efforts to support Somalia.
The AU has demanded to step up its African Union mission in Somalia, known as AMISOM, to 20,000, but needs additional funding from the UN. The UN is currently pledging $130 million a year in support funds to AMISOM forces deployed in Somalia. The AU also called for imposing a no-fly zone and a naval blockade on Somalia in a bid to prevent the flow of arms and recruits of militias who are waging a war on the transitional government. In addition, the AU wants to step up its efforts against acts of piracy and terrorism in the Horn of Africa, a move that the UN has welcomed.
As I indicated in my most recent report to the Security Council, I'm about to submit proposals to help boost the UN presence there.
الأممي وجد تأييدا أمريكيا كما لاقى ترحيبا من أوغندا الجارة صاحبة النصيب الأكبر في AMISOM.
The UN position was welcomed by the US as well as neighboring Uganda, which makes up most of the AMISOM force. Uganda expressed its willingness to supply all additional troops requested by the AU if the UN agrees to provide funding and logistical support for its troops. This indicates that there's a UN consensus, in principle, over an international intervention in Somalia. As far as the implementation process is concerned, the AU is asking for an immediate deployment while the West is leaning toward a gradual surge, pending military progress on the ground and more effective measures by the transitional government.
Now shifting to Haiti, officials there are saying they may be closer to containing an outbreak of cholera.
Relief workers in the cholera-hit Haiti could soon breathe a sigh of relief, as health officials say there are signs that the outbreak may be stabilizing. The officials say they have registered fewer deaths and infections in areas hardest hit by the epidemic.
Things seem to be calming down a little bit now. There are fewer people coming in, more people leaving. A lot of the people who looked like they were about ready to die this morning are sitting up, starting to drink, starting to take an interest in life around them.
The UN health officials say the death toll is slowing, but the outbreak is likely to widen. The epidemic has killed more than 250 people since it began a week ago. According to Haitian officials, more than 3,000 people have been infected in 3 provinces. This is the second humanitarian crisis in Haiti since January's devastating earthquake. Health experts believe over 1 million quake survivors living in crowded camps in and around the capital, Port-au-Prince, are most vulnerable to the disease.
Wow, you understand that how many people will have infected with these people in this camp and in the suburb area. So that's something that we won't like to see. But if it happens, it's going to be something very serious.
Relief organizations are now trying to keep the disease from spreading in refugee camps. They've isolated patients and handed out clean water and sanitation items among the residents. Haiti's President Rana Preval has visited one of the treatment centers to get a first-hand look at relief operations on the ground.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news. Read our blog. Get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.